Hey and welcome back, and in this lesson we are going to look at the array modifier. So in our default scene we can go ahead and we can delete the camera and the light. So I'm going to select those two and press X on the keyboard and then confirm by clicking delete. And then we're going to select our default cube and we're going to add a modifier or an array modifier to this object. So with this object selected, I'm going to click on the little spanner to open up the modifier properties panel on the side, and then you can click this drop down, add modifier, and then we're going to go for the array under generate. So if I click that array, you'll see something has happened with our cube. You can see it almost looks like two cubes next to each other, but you can't see any space between them. And in the properties panel you will see you have a count, and then you have a constant offset and also a relative offset. Now if I increase this count maybe to 3, you can see it just added a new cube next to the second one, and you can increase this all the way to whatever number you need, and you can see that it actually created an array of that one cube. Now currently the offset or the relative offset is set to 1, which means it will take that 1 unit of that mesh and it will just separate them according to that. So if I increase this number, you can see that we're actually creating a space between those cubes, because those cubes are 1 by 1 by 1. So if I set this to 2, you'll see there will be an exact space of 1 cube between each of these cubes, and that way you can create a whole array of the same object. So just remember, this is still one object. So if I select my cube and I zoom in here and I click on, or I press tab on the keyboard to go into edit mode, you'll see if I move any of these vertices around, you'll see that all my other cubes will actually do exactly the same. So let's go in here and maybe I select this face and I right click and say subdivide, and maybe let's subdivide that again, and maybe let's extrude some of these faces. So I'm going to select those faces, press E on the keyboard, extrude, and as you can see that is happening with all these other arrays as well. So I'm going to go out of edit mode by pressing tab, and then you can also specify the direction in which you want to have your array. So currently you can see this is X, Y, and Z. So we have a relative offset of 2 in the X axis, which is that axis. So if I change this to 0 and maybe change the Y to something like 1.5, you'll see that our array is now happening in the X axis. And I can obviously do the same with the Z as well. So I can set that back to 0 and maybe set the Z to 1.1. And you will see that our array will now be on that Z axis. You can also make this negative, so it can be -1, and then that will go down. Or you can also use something like -1 on the Y axis, and that will then just make that array go the other way. Now you can also increase these other numbers at the same time. So I can set this to maybe 1, and then maybe the Y to 1 as well, and then it will be something like that. You can also play with a Z, so you can kind of see how easy it is to maybe create something like stairs. So let's quickly do that. I'm going to delete this object completely, and then I'm going to create a new mesh. So Shift A on the keyboard and then cube, and I'm going to scale this one slightly. So let's just zoom in there by pressing period. And then I'm going to press S for scale, and then Z for Z direction, and then S for scale again, and then we're going to press Y to scale it in the Y direction like that. So we have that one step. So now I'm going to go to the array or the modifiers panel, click on add modifier array, and then I'm going to set this to on the X axis to 0, on the Y axis to maybe 1. And the Z I can increase slightly, maybe to something like 0.7. And now we can just increase this count. And as you can see, we are creating a staircase. Easy as that. So now we can go in here and I can press tab to go into edit mode. Now I can take this face and I can just press G on the keyboard to move it around. And then I want to move it in the X axis. So I'm pressing X, and now I can adjust the width of my staircase. Click, and there you have a perfect staircase. Now, just remember, as I said before, this is still just one object. You can't really edit these objects now. But what we can do is, if we go into this modifier panel, you can apply this modifier. So if I go apply, that modifier will actually disappear, and then this will become one object. So if I highlight it, press tab to go into edit mode, now you can see I can actually go in here and I can modify these steps individually. So I can change the length of one of them, maybe make that one a bit shorter. So as you can see, I can go in here and I can change them like that. So always make sure that you are happy with your results before you apply your modifier, because you can't really go back now and adjust the amount of steps. You will have to create a new array maybe from one of these objects and then carry on from there. So that is an overview of the array modifier. I will see you in the next lesson.